I'm Sarah Martinez, and I'm 28 years old. The text message that changed everything arrived on a cold December morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my marketing firm in Denver. It was from my mother. Sarah, your father and I have been discussing Christmas plans. Given the tension at Emma's birthday party, we think it's best if you don't join us this year. Marcus feels like you overshadow him, and we want to keep things peaceful. We can celebrate with you another time. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I was being uninvited from Christmas because my younger brother felt overshadowed by me. My hands shook as I set the phone down, the familiar knot of pain forming in my stomach that had plagued me since childhood. Growing up in our middle-class home in Phoenix, Arizona, our family looked perfect from the outside. Dad was a successful insurance broker, Mom taught high school English, Marcus was 2 years younger than me, and then there was me, always trying to be the perfect daughter. But behind our pristine facade, a toxic dynamic had been playing out for decades. From my earliest memories, Marcus was the center of our family's universe. He had what my parents diplomatically called emotional sensitivity, which really meant he threw explosive tantrums whenever things didn't go his way. He struggled in school, had few friends, and my parents poured all their energy into managing his fragile ego. Sarah, you know how Marcus gets, became the family motto. When he destroyed my art project because I got an A and he got a C, I was told to be understanding. When he screamed at my 8th grade graduation party because people were congratulating me, we had to leave early. When I made the varsity soccer team and he didn't make JV, my parents asked me to downplay my achievement. I learned early that my role was to be the accommodating one. I earned straight A's while helping Marcus with his homework. I won academic awards while my parents celebrated his C+ in math with dinner at his favorite restaurant. My victories were met with distracted nods, while his minor accomplishments warranted family celebrations. You're so mature, Sarah, Mom would say after another event was cut short because of Marcus's meltdown. You understand that Marcus needs extra support right now. And I believed it. I thought it was my job to make everyone else comfortable, even at the expense of my own happiness. College at the University of Colorado was my first taste of freedom. Away from Marcus's shadow, I discovered who I was beyond the role of accommodating sister. I excelled in my marketing program, made genuine friends, and for the first time, felt truly seen and valued. When graduation approached, my parents assumed I'd return home. They'd already found me a job at a local marketing firm, and Mom had started planning Sunday family dinners where I could help Marcus get back on track after he dropped out of community college. Instead, I accepted a position at a prestigious firm in Denver, 2 hours away. The guilt trips were immediate and intense. Denver is so far, Mom complained. Families should stick together. Marcus really needs your support right now. But for once, I held firm. Moving to Denver was the first decision I made purely for myself. Over the next 6 years, I built a life I was proud of. I worked my way up to senior marketing manager, bought a beautiful condo, and cultivated friendships with people who celebrated my successes instead of being threatened by them. I maintained regular contact with my family, calling weekly and visiting for holidays, always carefully navigating around topics that might trigger Marcus's insecurity, which was basically anything positive about my life. Meanwhile, Marcus, now 26, still lived at home, working part-time at a video game store and taking occasional online classes. Any suggestion of therapy or career counseling was met with defensive anger from my parents. Not everyone follows the same timeline, Sarah, Dad would say sternly whenever I gently suggested Marcus might benefit from professional help. Stop trying to fix everyone. I wasn't trying to fix anyone. I just wanted my brother to find the fulfillment I'd found. But my success seemed to highlight his struggles, creating a growing rift in our family. The breaking point came 6 months ago at my cousin Emma's 21st birthday party. Emma, my aunt's daughter, had just graduated college with a degree in graphic design and landed her dream job at a creative agency in Los Angeles. I was genuinely excited for her. It reminded me of my own journey from college to career success. The party was held at a trendy restaurant in Scottsdale, with about 30 family members and friends in attendance. I'd driven down from Denver specifically for the celebration, taking time off work and booking a hotel room. I was happy to be there, celebrating Emma's achievement and catching up with extended family I rarely saw. During dinner, I found myself chatting with Emma's new boyfriend, Jake, a fellow graphic designer who is curious about marketing and branding. We had a great conversation about the intersection of our fields, and I shared some insights about how marketing teams collaborate with creative departments. It was the kind of professional networking conversation I have regularly, nothing extraordinary, just two people in related fields discussing their work. That's when Marcus appeared beside our table, his face flushed with anger. "Really, Sarah?" he interrupted, his voice cutting through the restaurant's ambient noise. "At Emma's party, you're still talking about how successful you are?" I was taken aback. "Marcus, we were just discussing graphic design and marketing." I was congratulating Emma. "You are showing off," he continued, his voice getting louder. "You always do this. You come to family events and make sure everyone knows how amazing your career is while some of us are still figuring things out." The entire table had gone silent. Emma looked mortified, Jake seemed confused, and other family members were starting to stare. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I wasn't showing off," I said quietly. "We were having a normal conversation about work." "Normal for you, maybe," Marcus shot back. "Everything's so easy for perfect Sarah. Perfect job, perfect apartment, perfect life. Meanwhile, you make the rest of us feel like failures just by existing." Before I could respond, my parents materialized at the table. But instead of addressing Marcus's outburst, they turned to me with those familiar disapproving expressions. "Sarah," Mom said in a strained whisper, "maybe you should step outside for a few minutes." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, I didn't do anything wrong." "Please," Dad added, his voice carrying that tone I remembered from childhood. "Let's not make this worse." The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't the one who had interrupted a conversation, raised my voice, or created a scene. Yet somehow, I was being cast as the problem. Again, I quietly excused myself from the table and walked to the bathroom, where I locked the stall door and took deep breaths, trying not to cry. When I emerged, my Aunt Linda was waiting for me. "Sarah, honey, are you okay?" she asked gently. I shrugged, not trusting my voice. "For what it's worth," she continued, "you weren't doing anything wrong out there. You were just being friendly and talking about your work. There's nothing wrong with that." Her validation meant more than she could know. It was the first time in years that a family member had acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the problem in these situations. I stayed for the rest of Emma's party, but kept my conversations light and superficial, carefully avoiding any mention of my career or life in Denver. The evening felt like walking on eggshells, and I left feeling emotionally drained. In the days that followed, my parents called with their usual response to family drama. I should apologize to Marcus for being insensitive and showing off at Emma's party. When I tried to explain that I had simply been having a normal conversation, they dismissed my perspective entirely. "You know how sensitive Marcus is about career stuff," Mom said during one particularly frustrating call. "You could have been more considerate." But I wasn't talking about my career, I insisted. I was discussing Emma's new job with her boyfriend. "It amounts to the same thing," Dad interjected on speakerphone. "You are highlighting your success while Marcus is struggling." Their logic was so twisted that I couldn't even formulate a response. Apparently, my mere existence as a successful person was somehow an attack on Marcus's self-esteem. After several conversations that went nowhere, I decided to give everyone space. I didn't apologize because I hadn't done anything wrong, but I also stopped trying to defend myself. I returned to Denver feeling hurt but determined to focus on my own life. The months that followed were marked by increasingly strained family communications. Our weekly calls became stilted and superficial. Marcus never acknowledged his behavior at Emma's party. My parents acted as if nothing had happened while somehow treating me with a new coldness that I couldn't quite define. Still, nothing prepared me for that December text message. I read it again. "We think it's best if you don't join us this year. Marcus feels like you overshadow him." I was being excluded from Christmas, our most important family tradition, because my brother felt overshadowed by me. Not because I had done anything specific or harmful, but because my existence somehow made him feel bad about himself. My colleague Jennifer knocked on my office door. "Sarah? You look like you've seen a ghost." I showed her the text, and her expression shifted from concern to outrage. "They're uninviting you from Christmas because your brother has self-esteem issues?" she said incredulously. "That's insane." "Maybe I really do overshadow him," I said, falling into the familiar pattern of making excuses for my family's behavior. "Stop," Jennifer said firmly. "You are not responsible for managing your adult brother's feelings about himself. You didn't choose to be successful to hurt him. You worked hard and built a good life. That's something to be proud of, not something to apologize for." That evening, I called my best friend Maya from college, who had watched me navigate family drama for years. "They did what?" she exploded after I explained the situation. "Sarah, this is emotional abuse. You realize that, right?" The word abuse made me uncomfortable. My family wasn't abusive, they were just complicated. "It's not abuse," I protested weakly. "What do you call a family that systematically excludes one member to protect another member's ego?" Maya challenged. "What do you call parents who consistently prioritize one child's comfort over another child's basic inclusion?" Her words hit harder than I expected. I had never thought of it in those terms, but she wasn't wrong. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, Maya's words echoing in my mind. Was this pattern of exclusion and accommodation actually abusive? Had I been so conditioned to accept it that I couldn't see it clearly anymore? The next morning brought a follow-up text from Dad. "Your mother is very upset about all this. Marcus is already stressed about his job interview next week, and we don't want to add to his anxiety. Please understand, we're just trying to keep the peace." Once again, no acknowledgement of how I might be feeling. No recognition that I had just been told I wasn't welcome at Christmas. Just another reminder that Marcus's emotional state was the only one that mattered. Something inside me snapped. I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another, deleted that one too. Finally, I wrote something that felt true. "I understand you want to protect Marcus, but excluding me from Christmas is hurtful and unfair. I haven't done anything to deserve this treatment. I love our family, but I can't accept being pushed out because Marcus feels uncomfortable around my success. I'll be spending Christmas with friends this year." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came swiftly from Mom. "I'm very disappointed in your attitude, Sarah. After everything we've sacrificed for you kids, this is how you repay us? Marcus has always struggled more than you. Would it kill you to put someone else first for once?" Her message was so fundamentally disconnected from reality that I felt dizzy. I had been putting everyone else first my entire life. I had minimized my achievements, cut celebrations short, and twisted myself into impossible shapes to avoid threatening Marcus's fragile ego. The idea that I was selfish for finally pushing back was almost laughable. But it also crystallized something for me. This wasn't about Christmas dinner. This was about a lifetime of being told that my feelings, my achievements, and my very presence were somehow problematic. This was about a family system that required me to be less so that Marcus could feel like more. I called in sick to work, the first time I'd ever done so without actually being ill, and spent the day processing the magnitude of what was happening. I was mourning not just the loss of this Christmas, but the recognition that the family I'd always hoped for didn't actually exist. Maya drove down from Boulder that evening with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. "How are you holding up?" she asked as we settled on my couch. "I feel like I'm grieving," I admitted. "Not just Christmas, but this whole fantasy I've had that somehow, someday, my family would see me and value me the way they value Marcus." "That's exactly what you're doing," she said gently. "You're grieving the family you deserved but never had." Over the following days, I threw myself into planning an alternative Christmas. I reached out to friends, colleagues, and neighbors who might be spending the holiday alone. Within a week, I had 8 people committed to Christmas dinner at my place, people who genuinely wanted to be there, who valued my company without requiring me to diminish myself. The planning was therapeutic. I researched recipes, bought new dishes, and decorated my condo with care. For the first time, I was hosting Christmas on my own terms, creating the kind of inclusive, joyful celebration I'd always wanted. 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Emma. "Sarah, I heard about Christmas," she said without preamble. "Mom told me what happened, and I think it's awful." I was surprised by her directness. "Thanks, Em. I appreciate that. I keep thinking about my birthday party," she continued. "Marcus was so out of line, and I'm sorry no one stood up for you. You were just being friendly and supportive of my new job." There was nothing wrong with that conversation. Her validation meant everything. "Thank you for saying that. I've been questioning my own perception of what happened." "Don't," she said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong then, and you're not doing anything wrong now. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's healthy." Emma's support gave me strength, but it also highlighted how isolated I'd become within my extended family. Most of them probably had no idea what was really happening, and those who did seemed content to maintain the status quo rather than rock the boat. Christmas Day dawned crisp and clear in Denver. I woke early, excitement mixing with a touch of sadness as I thought about my family gathering without me in Phoenix. I allowed myself a moment to grieve what I'd lost, or perhaps what I'd never really had, before getting up to prepare for my chosen family celebration. My friends began arriving around noon, each bringing dishes, gifts, and, most importantly, their genuine presence. We cooked together, laughed together, and shared stories around my dining table. The contrast with my childhood Christmas experiences was stark. Here, no one was walking on eggshells, no one person's mood dictated the atmosphere, and there was room for everyone to be fully themselves. As we sat around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I was celebrating Christmas with people who truly wanted me there, not a diminished version of me, not me with conditions attached, but all of me. My phone buzzed with a few texts from extended family wishing me Merry Christmas, including a sweet message from Emma with photos from the family gathering. But there was nothing from my parents or Marcus. Their silence spoke volumes. That evening, after my friends had gone home, I sat in my living room looking at the remnants of our celebration, the empty wine glasses, the crumpled wrapping paper, the leftover pie, and felt a deep sense of peace. I had survived being excluded from my family's Christmas, and more than survived, I had created something beautiful in its place. The week between Christmas and New Year's brought an unexpected development. My father called, something he rarely did. "Sarah," he said, his voice uncertain, "your mother and I have been talking. We think maybe we handled things poorly." I waited, not wanting to make it easier for him by filling the silence. "We don't want to lose you," he continued. "Maybe we could all sit down and talk when you're ready. Maybe with a counselor or something." It wasn't a full apology, and it didn't acknowledge the specific harm they'd caused, but it was the first crack in their certainty that I'd seen in years. "I'd be open to family counseling," I said carefully. "But only if Marcus is willing to participate, and only if everyone is genuinely committed to examining our family patterns." "I think he would be," Dad said, though he sounded less certain about that part. We agreed to discuss details after the holidays, and I hung up feeling cautiously hopeful. I had no illusions that family therapy would magically fix decades of dysfunction, but it might create a space for honest conversation that had never existed before. As I prepared for the new year, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past month. From the painful exclusion from Christmas to the tentative possibility of family healing, I had navigated emotional territory I never expected to explore. Most importantly, I had learned that I could survive setting boundaries with my family. I had discovered that being excluded from their dysfunction didn't mean I was unworthy of inclusion elsewhere. I had built a chosen family of friends who celebrated all of who I am. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents and Marcus. I hope family counseling will help us build healthier patterns. I hope they can learn to see my success as something to celebrate rather than something that threatens Marcus's self-worth. I hope Marcus can develop the emotional skills to be happy for others instead of feeling diminished by their achievements. But regardless of what happens with them, I know I'll be okay. Better than okay. I've stepped out of the role I was assigned as a child, the role of managing everyone else's emotions at the expense of my own well-being. I've learned that real love doesn't require me to make myself smaller, and that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to participate in our own diminishment, even when that refusal disappoints the people we love most. This Christmas, I learned that I am worthy of celebration, inclusion, and joy, not despite my success, but because of who I am as a whole person. And that realization, painful as the journey was to reach it, has been the greatest gift I could have given myself. The new year brought unexpected developments. 3 weeks into January, I received a text from Marcus, the first direct communication we'd had since the Christmas exclusion. The message was short. Can we talk? I've been thinking about a lot of things. My first instinct was skepticism. In our family's history, Marcus's moments of apparent self-reflection usually preceded attempts to manipulate me back into my accommodating role. But something in the simplicity of his message felt different. I waited 2 days before responding. I'm open to talking if you're genuinely ready to listen and reflect, not just to convince me to go back to the way things were. He replied quickly, I understand. Can I call you this weekend? Saturday evening, my phone rang with Marcus's name on the caller ID. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. Hi, Sarah, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Thanks for taking my call. What did you want to talk about? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. There was a long pause. I've been seeing a therapist, he said finally. Started in December after everything. She's been helping me understand some things about myself and our family. This was the last thing I'd expected to hear. Marcus had always vehemently refused any suggestion of therapy, claiming it was for weak people who couldn't handle their own problems. What made you decide to try therapy? I asked. Another pause. Honestly, Amber. She said she couldn't marry someone who treated his sister the way I treated you at Emma's party. She said I was acting like a spoiled child, and that if I couldn't figure out how to be happy for other people's success, she wasn't sure we had a future. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Amber, whom I'd always liked but barely knew. She was right to call you out on that, I said. I know, he said, his voice heavy. Sarah, I owe you an apology. Not just for Emma's party, but for 4 years of taking my insecurities out on you. My therapist helped me see that I've been using you as a scapegoat for my own feelings of inadequacy. The words I'd waited my entire life to hear hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to accept the apology immediately, to rush back into the familiar dynamic of forgiveness and accommodation. But Dr. Richardson, the therapist I'd started seeing after Christmas, had warned me about this moment. Apologies are important, she'd said during one of our sessions, but they're just the beginning. Real change requires sustained effort and behavioral modification, not just words. I appreciate you saying that, Marcus, I said carefully. What are you planning to do differently going forward? That's what I'm working on in therapy, he said. Understanding why I felt so threatened by your success, why I needed Mom and Dad to treat you like you were the problem when the problem was really my own self-esteem. We talked for nearly an hour. Marcus shared insights from his therapy sessions, including the recognition that our parents had enabled his emotional immaturity by always accommodating his outbursts and making me responsible for managing his feelings. I think I knew, on some level, that it wasn't fair, he admitted. But it was easier to let them make you the problem than to face my own issues. For the first time in our relationship, I heard Marcus take full responsibility for his actions without deflection or excuses. It was a start, but I knew that real change would take time to manifest in consistent behavior. I'm glad you're working on yourself, I told him. But Marcus, I can't go back to the way things were. I won't make myself smaller to protect your feelings anymore. I know, he said quietly. I wouldn't want you to. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize what I was asking of you. After we hung up, I sat in my living room processing the conversation. It felt surreal to have Marcus acknowledge the dynamic I'd been trapped in for so long. But I also felt a wariness born of years of disappointment. Words were easy. Consistent behavioral change was much harder. A week later, I received a call from Mom. Her voice was tentative, lacking its usual certainty. Sarah, honey, your father and I would like to talk with you. Could you come home for a weekend? We'd like to try that family counseling your father mentioned. "What about Marcus?" I asked. "He's already agreed to participate," she said. "He's actually the one who suggested we find someone as soon as possible." This was another surprise. In our family, Marcus had never been the one pushing for difficult conversations or emotional work. I agreed to come home the following weekend for a family therapy session. Dr. Patricia Hernandez was a licensed family therapist who specialized in sibling dynamics and family systems. Her office in Phoenix was warm but professional, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle rather than the traditional couch and chair setup. The first session was awkward and painful. My parents struggled to acknowledge their role in the family dysfunction, frequently falling back into old patterns of defending their choices and minimizing my experiences. "We always tried to treat you kids equally," Mom insisted when Dr. Hernandez asked about the different standards applied to Marcus and me. "Can you give me an example of a time when Marcus was asked to accommodate Sarah's needs the way Sarah was consistently asked to accommodate his?" Dr. Hernandez inquired gently. The long silence that followed was telling. "Marcus had different challenges," Dad said finally. "He needed more support." "And what message did that send to Sarah about her value in the family?" Dr. Hernandez pressed. It was Marcus who answered, his voice barely above a whisper, that her feelings didn't matter as much as mine. Over the course of several sessions, painful truths were excavated. Dr. Hernandez helped us identify the family roles we'd all been playing. Marcus as the identified patient, whose struggles justified the family's dysfunction, me as the scapegoat, who carried the blame for family tensions, Mom as the enabler, who facilitated the unhealthy dynamic, and Dad as the minimizer, who avoided confronting difficult emotions by downplaying their significance. "Sarah," Dr. Hernandez said during our fourth session, "you've spent your life trying to earn a place in this family by being perfect. But the place was always yours by right. You shouldn't have had to earn it." The work was exhausting but necessary. My parents slowly began to see how their well-intentioned efforts to protect Marcus had actually harmed both of their children. Marcus by enabling his emotional immaturity, and me by teaching me that my needs were secondary. "I thought I was being a good mother," Mom said through tears during one particularly difficult session. "Marcus was struggling so much, and you were so capable. It seemed like you could handle anything." "But I was still your child too," I replied, my own eyes filling. I needed to feel like my struggles mattered, like my achievements were celebrated, like I had a secure place in the family that didn't depend on how well I managed everyone else's emotions. The breakthrough came during our sixth session when Dad, who had been the most resistant to acknowledging the family's problems, broke down completely. "I failed you, Sarah," he sobbed. "I was so focused on trying to fix Marcus that I forgot I had another daughter who needed me too. I let you carry burdens that should never have been yours to carry." It was the first time I'd ever seen my father cry, and his raw vulnerability cracked something open in my chest that had been frozen for years. The family therapy sessions continued monthly, with individual sessions for each family member in between. The work was slow and sometimes painful, but genuine progress was being made. My parents were learning to see our family dynamic clearly for the first time, and Marcus was developing emotional regulation skills he'd never been taught as a child. The real test came in June when Marcus and Amber announced their engagement party date, a do-over of the previous year's disaster. I was hesitant to attend, worried that we'd fall back into old patterns when faced with family stress. "I understand your concerns," Dr. Hernandez said during my individual session. "What would you need to feel safe and respected at this event?" We worked together to identify specific boundaries. I would attend for a limited time, I would leave immediately if Marcus had an outburst directed at me, and I would allow myself to engage in normal conversations without monitoring Marcus's reactions. The night of the engagement party, I drove to Phoenix with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The event was held at the same restaurant as Emma's birthday party, which felt symbolically significant. When I arrived, Marcus approached me immediately. "Sarah, I'm really glad you came," he said, and I could see he meant it. "I want you to know that I've talked to Amber's family about my behavior last time. I told them I was completely out of line and that it had nothing to do with you." This was huge. Marcus had never before taken responsibility for his actions to people outside our immediate family. The evening proceeded smoothly. I had natural conversations with other guests, including Amber's parents, without constantly monitoring Marcus's emotional state. When Martin Reynolds, Amber's father, asked about my work, I answered honestly and enthusiastically. Marcus, who was standing nearby, actually joined the conversation and asked thoughtful questions about my recent projects. "That sounds really challenging and rewarding," he said when I described a campaign I'd led for a nonprofit organization. "I'm proud of you, Sar." The use of my childhood nickname and the genuine pride in his voice made my eyes well up. It was the first time I could remember Marcus expressing genuine happiness about my achievements. The party was a success, but more importantly, it proved that our family could function differently when everyone committed to healthier patterns. As summer progressed, I noticed continued changes in our family dynamic. My parents began asking about my life with genuine interest rather than just going through the motions. They celebrated my promotion to marketing director with the same enthusiasm they'd once reserved for Marcus's minor accomplishments. Marcus and I started talking regularly for the first time since childhood. Our conversations were still tentative sometimes, but they were real. He told me about his therapy insights, his relationship with Amber, and his slow progress toward independence. I shared my own struggles and victories without feeling like I had to minimize them. The biggest change came in September when Marcus announced he was moving in with Amber and looking for full-time work in graphic design, something he'd always been passionate about but had been too afraid to pursue. "I think I was scared of trying and failing," he admitted during one of our phone calls. "It felt safer to stay stuck and blame other people for my problems than to risk finding out I might not be good enough." "You'll never know until you try," I said. "And even if you struggle at first, that's just part of learning. I believe in you, Marcus." Saying those words felt revolutionary. For the first time, I was able to genuinely support my brother without feeling like I had to diminish myself in the process. October brought another milestone. Marcus got a job as a junior graphic designer at a local marketing firm. When he called to tell me the news, his excitement was infectious. "They said they were impressed by my portfolio," he said, pride evident in his voice. "And get this, they asked if I knew any good marketing people in Denver because they're looking to expand their client base there." I laughed, feeling a warmth in my chest that had been absent for so long. I might know someone who could help with that. For our family's first Christmas together since the exclusion, the atmosphere was completely different. Marcus and Amber hosted at their new apartment, and for the first time in family memory, the celebration wasn't organized around managing anyone's emotional fragility. We cooked together, played games, and shared stories without walking on eggshells. When someone brought up my recent work success, a major campaign that had won a national award, Marcus was the first to raise his glass in celebration. "To my brilliant sister," he said, his voice clear and proud, "who taught me that other people's success doesn't diminish your own worth." As I looked around the table at my family, really looked at them, not through the lens of old resentments and expectations, I realized something profound had shifted. We weren't perfect, and we probably never would be. The work of unlearning decades of dysfunction was ongoing and sometimes difficult. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a real place at this table. Not a conditional place that depended on making myself smaller or managing everyone else's emotions, but a secure place based on the simple truth that I belonged here because I was loved and valued for who I am. The journey from that painful text message 13 months earlier to this moment had been longer and more difficult than I ever could have imagined. But it had led to something I'd never dared to hope for, a family that could see me, celebrate me, and love me without conditions. Sometimes the most important battles we fight are for our own worth, and sometimes the people we have to fight hardest to convince are the ones who are supposed to love us unconditionally. But when that fight leads to genuine change and authentic relationships, every difficult moment becomes worthwhile. I still have the text message that started it all saved on my phone. Sometimes I read it to remind myself how far we've all come and how much courage it took to refuse to accept being diminished. It's a reminder that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of love, both for yourself and for the people who need to learn healthier ways of relating to you. Today, as I write this, I can honestly say that I have the family I always wanted. Not because they became perfect, but because we all did the hard work of becoming real with each other. And that, more than any Christmas dinner or family celebration, is the greatest gift I could have asked for.